Destroying a house of worship of any faith community is really targeting the jugular vein of that community. I know. I saw the burning and destruction of my synagogue. I endured war and hunger and persecution, and with pain, the loss of my family in the crematoria of Auschwitz and Lublin.
From Park East Synagogue on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, welcome to the United Nations International Holocaust Remembrance Service, commemorating the 76th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Mizmor LeDavid, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Roi lechsad, Elot Deshe Yarisei, Amelenu Chot Nahareli, Nafsi Yeshaveh, Nafsi Yeshaveh, Yakeini v'magei tzedek, Leman Shemo Shemo. Gam ki elech bebeit Almamet, lo yirah imani, shivtecha u'mishantecha, shivtecha u'mishantecha, emay lamoni, ta'och lefanai, lefanai shulchan, ta'och lefanai shulchan, ne'el tzorelai, v'shanta v'ashemet v'ashemet roshi, v'shanta v'ashemet roshi, osirehaya. Ach tov v'chesed, yirgefuni, kol yemei chayai, ושבתי בבית אדוני, ושבתי בבית אדוני, לאורך ימים, לאורך ימים.
The keynote prayer, Shema Yisrael, Hear, O Israel.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Tree of Life, Etz Chaim.
Eitz Chaim hi, lama chazikim ba, v'tomcheha me'osha, Shalom.
Secretary General, Excellencies, dear friends, we are gathered for the United Nations Holocaust Remembrance annual service at Park East Synagogue. Guidelines prevent us from holding it in our historic landmark congregation, in our beautiful sanctuary, but I do feel we are connected. We are connected collectively, remembering man's inhumanity to man that claimed the lives of 6 million men, women, and children, including my own family who perished in Auschwitz. Dear friend, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, your voice of conscience, regularly addressing in our sanctuary the diplomatic corps, Holocaust survivors, reminding us not to forget, not to forget. As a child in Vienna, after Anschluss, I encountered the dehumanization of Jews through radio and Goebbels' propaganda sheet, the Stürmer, a hate sheet laying down the foundation for the burning of synagogue throughout Germany, including my own on Kristallnacht on November 9, 1938. Concentration camps, deportations from Nazi-occupied lands into the fictitious East resettlement program, a fictitious designation, the crematoria of Auschwitz. 1.5 million Jewish children, some of who were my own classmates, perished. I survived, scarred but not paralyzed, in my faith in God and man and the best of humanity. I gained a new lease on life in 1945 thanks to the humanitarian intervention of a Swiss Consul General, Karl Lutz, and the liberation of the ghetto by the Red Army. As a witness to the horrific crimes, I made a commitment not to remain silent or indifferent to the cry of the oppressed, regardless of race, creed, or color. The Bible tells us, Zachor, remember the evil of Amalek and the successors of Amalek. Evils perpetrated throughout the ages against humanity. We do not remember only for the sake of the past, but for a better future. If we do not carry the tragic lessons of history, these tragedies are doomed to be repeated. The guiding principle, memory and not amnesia, is a moral imperative to quell the rise of hate, which is greater today than any time since the end of World War II. Leaving my birthplace, Vienna, and a devastated Europe, which had lost tens of millions of people during the war, the Nazis were in hiding their true identities and diabolic plans, and anti-Semitism was socially unacceptable. 76 years later, painfully, a divided world in upheaval is not only facing the virus COVID-19, but also the social cancer of anti-Semitism that was in remission for a while. The cancer has metastasized in Europe, in the United States. The poisonous image of swastikas, again defacing synagogues and cemeteries in France, Germany, the most recent one in Montreal. Anti-Semitism and its camouflage, anti-Zionism, Holocaust denial are the rallying cries for all hate mongers of our day, including Camp Auschwitz and 6 MWE shorthand for 6 million was enough outfits. A scourge on any society. Racism and xenophobia are the variants and mutations of anti-Semitism. Hatred must be stopped in its tracks. United, we must defeat these plagues against humanity. It's disturbing to learn, according to an NBC survey, that millennials and Generation Z members, 60% of those surveyed did not know that 6 million Jews have perished. And every 10 respondents did not know that the Holocaust was a historical occurrence. Social and media internet technology, via their platforms far more sophisticated and wide-ranging and reaching than Goebbels, are spreading anti-Semitism at an unprecedented rate, abusing freedom of speech. Dear friends, children are not born with hatred. They are taught how to hate. When infected, they become carriers of hatred. The antidote is education, education, education. Love your neighbor as yourself and respect the other. They are the cornerstones of a civilized world. 15 years ago, I participated in the celebration of the United Nations General Assembly resolution that called for the observance of International Day of Commemoration, silencing those who denied the Holocaust, and the establishment of the UN Holocaust Education Outreach Program. Under your leadership, my friend, Secretary General Guterres, has really gained momentum, educating people in different parts of the world of man's capacity to do evil but also repair the world. Action is needed now. First, enhancing the number of countries that observe International Holocaust Commemoration Day must be a challenging priority. Expanding Holocaust education by utilizing the best and most effective technology available for dissemination. Holocaust education programs in schools, a must. These are important priorities, and I'm quoting you, Secretary General, quote, "It is our duty to look, to learn, and to relearn the lessons of the Holocaust so it is not repeated." There's one single threat underlying all different crises in our world today. There's the loss of a common narrative. The key to stabilizing our fractured world is to find the fundamentals we can all and must agree on. Oxford Dictionaries chose post-truth as its word for the 2016 year. Holocaust commemoration, never forget, must be our common narrative. United, we must defeat anti-Semitism, xenophobia, racism, and lift the burden of a wounded and divided world.
Rabbi Schneier, Holocaust survivors, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. We meet today online and around the world to commemorate the 76th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp and to honor the memory of the 6 million Jews and millions of others who were systematically murdered in the Holocaust by the Nazis and their collaborators. I am particularly privileged to speak to the Holocaust survivors who join us from across the globe, including Rabbi Schneier himself. You inspire us all with your courage, resilience, and endurance. I have visited the wonderful Park East Synagogue to mark the occasion every year since I became Secretary General. But today, we are prevented from gathering together in person by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has already cost 2 million lives and sickened more than 90 million people around the world. I send my sincere condolences to those who have lost family members, loved ones, and friends. I deeply admire the essential and frontline workers who have protected and supported their communities, and particularly the most vulnerable, during these difficult times, risking their own lives. The pandemic has put our societies to the test. It has exacerbated long-standing injustices and divisions, and it has contributed to a resurgence of anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and hate speech. Propaganda linking Jews with the pandemic, for example, by accusing them of creating the virus as part of a bid for global domination, would be ridiculous if it were not so dangerous. And this is just the latest manifestation of an anti-Semitic trope that takes back to at least the 14th century, when Jews were accused of spreading the bubonic plague. Anti-Semitism is the oldest, most persistent and entrenched form of racism and religious persecution in our world. From imperial Rome to medieval Europe to the modern world, Jews and their communities have suffered 2 millennia of attacks, expulsions, and periodic mass killings. In the 19th century, Jews were blamed for financial crashes in which they themselves were the main victims. Anti-Semitism found its most horrific expression in the Holocaust. The universal revulsion at this crime, followed by the founding of the United Nations and the signing of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, promised an end. But it did not end. Anti-Semitism continues to blight our world. It is sad, but not surprising, that the COVID-19 pandemic has triggered yet another eruption of this poisonous ideology. We can never let down our guard. Today, Holocaust denial, distortion, and minimization are resurgent. In Europe, the United States, and elsewhere, white supremacists are organizing and recruiting across borders, flaunting the symbols and tropes of the Nazis and their murderous ambitions. We have seen shocking examples in the nation's capital in recent days. The Anti-Defamation League found that the American Jewish community experienced the highest level of anti-Semitic incidents in 2019 since tracking began in 1979. The COVID-19 pandemic has provided new areas for neo-Nazi activities. As people spend more time at home and online, white supremacists and neo-Nazis are using social media platforms to disseminate propaganda and create fear and hatred. They exploit the anxiety and social turmoil created by the pandemic to target minorities based on religion, race, ethnicity, nationality, sexual orientation, disability, and immigration status. They even trade information on how to infect minority communities by effectively making themselves into bioweapons. Tragically, after decades in the shadows, neo-Nazis and their ideas are now gaining currency. The United States authorities have warned that white supremacists and nativist movements are on the rise across the country and around the world. For the first time, they have designated white supremacist leaders as terrorists. In some countries, neo-Nazi ideas can be heard in debates between mainstream political parties. In others, neo-Nazis have infiltrated police and state security services. While this is horrifying, we can find some reassurance when governments take responsibility and action. What is even more concerning is the certainty that neo-Nazi activities are taking place elsewhere, undetected and unchallenged. Together, we must urgently strengthen our efforts against the danger they pose. Distinguished guests, dear friends, the continued rise of white supremacy and neo-Nazi ideology must be seen in the context of a global attack on truth that has reduced the role of science and fact-based analysis in public life. These attacks are dangerous and deliberate. Power-hungry, autocratic leaders have always undermined truths so that they can impose their own narratives based on lies, half-truths, and innuendo. When truth dies, it is far easier to exploit real and imagined differences between groups, to invent scapegoats, demonize innocent people and communities, and break the social bonds that unite us all. The fragmentation of the traditional media and the growth of social media platforms are contributing to a proliferation of different narratives with no shared basis on agreed facts. When the truth is just one version among many, lying becomes normalized and history can be distorted and rewritten. As the historian Deborah Lipstadt has pointed out, this can alter the way established truth is transmitted from generation to generation so that there is no ultimate historical reality. When almost 2/3 of the young Americans do not know that 6 million Jews were killed during the Holocaust, we have to ask whether this process is already underway. This has clear implications for today's commemoration and for all our activities to educate and inform on the Holocaust. As the number of Holocaust survivors diminishes every year, we must make ever great efforts to elevate the truth and ensure that it lives on. distinguished guests, dear friends, the theme of this year's Holocaust observance is facing the aftermath, recovery and reconstitution after the Holocaust. For many Jews, the end of the Holocaust was only the beginning of an unimaginable, painful and difficult journey. To take just one example, Anne Frank's father, Otto Frank, learned that his wife and two daughters had died only after the Holocaust had ended. No Holocaust survivor could ever recover the life they had had. The Holocaust changed the world forever. There is no going back. Today, as we consider the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, we can take important lessons from the Holocaust. The recovery must address the fragilities and fissures that have been exposed by the pandemic. It must strengthen our mutual bonds based on our common humanity. This year must be a year of healing, healing from the pandemic, and healing our broken societies in which hatred has all too easily taken root. Recovery must include investment in social cohesion, so that every community feels valued both for itself and as part of the whole. Political, religious, and community leaders must seek common ground and build consensus if we are to emerge safely from these dangerous times. The United Nations strives everywhere to support governments in building inclusive, diverse, respectful societies founded on the human rights and the rule of law. Our blueprint is the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Sustainable Development Goals. We need coordinated global action on the scale of the threat we face to build an alliance against the growth and spread of neo-Nazism and white supremacy and to fight propaganda and disinformation. For the past 15 years, our Holocaust outreach program has carried the testimony of survivors and its relevance today around the world. Our written materials and videos inform and raise awareness because never again means telling the story again and again. Our United Nations Plan of Action to safeguard religious sites offers concrete steps to support governments so that all can enjoy their right to observe religious rituals in safety. And our UN strategy and plan of action on hate speech is a demonstration of our commitment to act together against this phenomenon. Prevention is key to the fight against anti-Semitism, and I sincerely thank Rabbi Schneier and all those who work with, and for the Appeal of Conscience Foundation for the efforts to promote interfaith understanding. Distinguished guests, dear friends, history shows that those who undermine truth ultimately undermine themselves. The only way out of the COVID-19 pandemic is through science and fact-based analysis. The production of vaccines in record time is testimony to the effectiveness of this approach. But there is no vaccine for anti-Semitism and xenophobia. Our best weapon remains the truth. The United Nations will continue to stand with you and against lies, bigotry, and hatred of all kinds. Our best tribute to those who died in the Holocaust is the creation of a world of equality, justice, and dignity for all, and I thank you.
At this time, I would ask everyone to please rise for the memorial prayer, the Kael Malay, chanted by our chief cantor, Helfgott.
Bema שנשחטו, שנשרפו, שנחנקו ושנקברו חיים על קידוש השם בעבור שאנו מתפללים לעילוי נשמותיהם בגן עדן. תהיה מנוחתם, לוחין בעל רחמים, יסתירם בססר כנופו לעולמים ויצרויר ביצרויר החיים אס נשמותיהם אדוני הוא נחלתו וינוחו בשלום על משכבם ויעמדו לכל עולם לקץ הימים ונאמר
Faith and not fear sustains us. And even on their death march to crematoria, they chanted, Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema. We have faith in you, O God.
אני מאמין, אני מאמין, אני מאמין באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח, בביאת המשיח אני מאמין ואף על פי שהתמהמה עם כל זה אני מאמין.
I'm about to recite the memorial Kaddish. I want to dedicate it to the 6 million of our people, men, women, and children, who perished, life extinguished, including my own grandparents, Rabbi Moses Bergman, Tova Bergman, my father's father, Joseph Schneier, uncles, cousins, family members who never made it. The Kaddish memorial prayer, which is recited by the mourner, does not mention death at all. We don't ask God why. We ask God for faith, how to carry on after the great loss. And that really has been our strength to carry on after the Holocaust and then the emergence of Holocaust survivors to start a new life in Israel, Europe, United States. Yes, l'chaim, to life. I will recite the mourner's Kaddish. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabbah, v'yalmad divrach Yerusei, v'yamich b'chusei, v'chay yechon v'yom yechon v'chay l'chol beis Yisrael, b'agolo b'zman kori b'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah v'rach l'olod maya, yisborach v'yishtabach v'yispar v'yisramah v'yistasei, yisadar v'yisadar v'yisalol shemei l'kudishah b'richu, leila min kol b'chasa b'shirasa, tishb'chasa b'nachem asad amiyam yalma b'imru amen. Yehei shlomo rabbah min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'kol Yisrael b'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imru amav, huyasa shalom aleinu v'kol Yisrael b'imru amen. We conclude that memorial prayer and we ask God for shalom, shalom, salam, peace.
Oseh shalom b'imromav, huyaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
Children represent continuity, extension of life, yes, eternity. And so we always hope and pray. We want something better, a world of peace, a world of kindness, a world of generosity for the children, our future. Our Father, our King, remove pestilence and sword, famine and plunder, destruction and iniquity, plague and misfortune, all disease and obstruction, all persecution and baseless enmity from your children, for us and all humanity. Let us say, Amen.